You remember when we started and we said how comes people are usually treated
Yes.
in an organization. So communication, some will say communication is strategic, PR is only needed during crisis. Silence, because people will say let's just be silent about it to protect the reputation. Yes, it is possible for organizations to rewrite their story. But this is not done through rebranding alone. The logos, the colors, and all that. That is important, but that's not the main thing. Institutions can rewrite their narratives through behavior consistency. If maybe it was more of a complaint, now they're able to have a desk that is handling that. When it's service delivery, they're able to have people who are handling service delivery. They're also accountable to what is happening, to what they're doing. And transparency is actually very core, so that when things happen, people don't just jump into it, because they understand that this organization has been telling us a story.
Hey, and welcome to yet another episode of Narratives and Power, where we explore how narratives shape identity, power, and perception in a digital world, and how the stories we believe influence how we show up in life. I'm Julie Wanjiko. I'm a broadcast journalist, a communication specialist, and a media and communication trainer. My work converges at the intersection of media, communication, digital platforms, and lived experiences in order to unpack how narratives shape leadership, perception, and opportunity. Now, today's episode is special to me for two reasons. First, it is the very first time we are hosting a guest here on Narratives and Power. Second, when I think about how I met my guest today, it still gives me goosebumps, literally. Sample this. I walk into a meeting where we're talking about something totally different, but the person I'm seated next to tells me in a few minutes they're going to be joining a conversation on X about narratives and how they shape institutions. So, if you're anything like me, your antenna goes up. So I don't hear anything else they say, and I'm stuck at the narratives. So when they finish, I ask them, narratives? You know someone who wants to talk about narratives? And she says, yeah, I'm actually just about to join this conversation. Long story short, that is how I was introduced to my lovely guest today. It is my great pleasure to welcome to Narratives and Power, Anne Lichuma, who wears very many hats. Anne is a communications strategist. She is an author of The Governance Narrative and host and moderator of Communication Conversations and curator of Comms in Action. Welcome to the show, Anne.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
It's great to finally have you here after two postponements. Yeah?
Yes.
All good things to those who wait, right?
Yes, sure.
And we are honored that you're our very first guest.
It is my pleasure to be here.
So before we get into narratives and how they shape institutions, because that's our focus today, tell us how you got into communications and what drew you to unpacking narratives.
Well, a good storytelling is very critical in any engagement. And I have seen the transformation that happens when people have access to information and when they also receive information. And at that intersection is when I understood the power of communication, because it shapes perception, there's credibility, there's also trust. And as I was looking at it from that angle, I also started realizing that the institutions that are doing very well, the ones that have more clients, or they're succeeding in their mission, in their goals, and their objectives, be it in any industry, their communication is very clear, it's very precise, and it's very trustworthy. And that's the work I do today. That's where I sit at this point in strategic comms, institutional narratives, and also in stakeholder engagement. Yes.
What's your understanding of a narrative?
Jules, there's messaging. Messaging is what you tell me, but narratives is what we believe over time. And this belief is usually comes from what you have experienced with you or with the organization generally, and that now becomes your reality. Let's look at when institutions say they care about their citizens or their publics, but you're constantly hearing complaints, there's delay in their outcomes, leadership sometimes do not match the actions that the organization stands for, and sometimes they also remain silent. That also shapes the entire narrative of what people think about when it comes to institutions, and sometimes even leadership and your environment.
Right. So let's come to the individual who is part of this big institution. How would you differentiate between messaging and narratives? Like, I work in a certain institution.
Yes.
What's the difference between the messaging I'm telling myself or other people and the narrative that I believe about myself or the institution?
You can come and say you deliver on time.
Yep.
You respond to queries. When questions arises, you're able to address that issue. But what actually happens is people do not see that. They do not live that. Yeah, when they call these delays, when there's call, there is either postponement of that particular issue, or sometimes there's nothing at all, there's silence. Yes. So the message you're telling people is this works, but what we see, but what we know is that it is not working like that. Yes.
I remember when I was looking you up and I came across the fact that you author the governance narrative. I found that to be so fascinating. What's that about? Is it a book? Is it a space? What do you do with the governance narrative?
Well, the governance narrative is a platform where I share the role, how communication affects leadership, institutions, and also stakeholders in an organization. Yes, so we delve deeper into those aspects. Like recently, I've written about the hidden economy of communication, and I've also talked about the politics of reputation. So there are various topics that I write about. Yes,
You just mentioned something, the economics of communication.
the hidden economy.
Hidden economy
Yes.
of communication.
Yes.
Now, I have seen instances where communication is treated like it's a third wheel in the institution. So much so that when there are budget cuts, it's the communication department that's usually targeted. Is this what you address in that hidden cost of communication?
Yes, that is one of the issues I am addressing, because with the coming of technology, many leaders are still yet to come to terms with what comms really do. Because how it has been portrayed over time is we react more than being proactive. So they usually come to us, and that's why in most organizations, it's not considered as the core function of the business. It's considered as the secondary factor of the business, and that's why sometimes it's very you rarely see people in comms in leadership or in the governance table. Yes, that's the challenge that we are having. And what they do not understand is there's a relationship between the narrative and the hidden cost. Because sometimes when narratives are not said properly, you can find projects that have stalled for years simply because of the stories that have been told. And sometimes you can find projects that are really doing very well the same way because of the stories that are being told. And that is where we sit at. So when organization and leadership in particular understand this, they will be able to put comms in the right position. Yes.
Is that a narrative on its own? That communication is just something that the budgets can be hived off. Like it's an addition, it's a low-hanging fruit. And I've also experienced cases where you even see that in the institution itself, the way they perceive the managers, it's like the communication manager is considered to be the softer one or the a little lower one.
What I'd say, this has to be a very collective responsibility, both from the comms people and also from the organization, because most of the time, everyone, Julie, is communicating. Even you and I right now,
Yes.
we are communicating. Yes. But from an organizational level, the stakes are high. Yes, because that is how we connect to our publics and our audiences. And so when we are treated like that, that's when you also look at the outcomes of how the organization actually will portray itself, it will be in the same space, in the same breath. Yes.
So, what would you say is the power of narratives in an institution? How do they shape the way the public perceives that institution?
Narratives are very strong, because with narratives, that's where credibility comes. And when you have credibility, it is you're able to achieve your goals or objectives or mission slightly faster, compared to when your narratives are not working. I'd like to give you an example. There's an organization that were dealing with they wanted to build a school in a certain village. And the narrative around there was that these people will take away their land and they will take away their people. So there was resistance. In as much as the comms people went there and they said, this is what we will do, this is how you will benefit from it, there was that hardness from them. And so they wondered what was wrong. But what was happening is, after they left, usually in community setups, there are those, what I'd say, leaders in that community space. Yeah. They did not consult those leaders. And now this time around, when they came, they consulted them. And then the people said, if you want us to feel like we are part of this, then tell us to also really be part of it. So you'd see some people who are able to bring sand or other local materials to build that. When they were doing that, they felt like that was theirs. Yes, they felt like this is ours, this is what we're supposed to do. Yes, because it's just the stories around. Because if they could have stuck to the first story, they could not have been able to move.
And do you find that organizations actually care about what their public perception is? I ask because I have seen cases and experienced cases where someone is interacting with a particular organization. The services maybe are slow, emails are not responded to on time, customer questions are not responded to. And it seems like this goes on for years on end, to a point where now what starts happening is that the customers or the public now starts readjusting to accommodate that bad behavior. So do you think organizations, in your experience, do you find that organizations actually care about the narrative that's out there to the public concerning them?
Historically, when we look at especially monopolies, some of them, I'd say, they're not really concerned, because they're the service providers and people would eventually come to them. But in this digital era, I think that is really changing, because a lot of things are at stake. There's international investors, there's also regulatory issues, there's public activism. So those are some of the issues that are making them to want to actually care about what the narrative outside there is about them. Yeah.
You talked about monopolies, and I find that for some reason, many of our organizations and institutions are monopolies. So they can get away with, you shape up or you ship out. This is how we do things, and this is how we do things. But what about startups and small and medium businesses that are not monopolies, that actually rely on goodwill from the customers and the public? How differently have you seen those do business?
Those ones, I'd say they're hands-on. SMEs, they're very hands-on when it comes to handling or addressing issues with their publics or the stories that are going around. Because as you're trying to build, you also want a specific narrative around your business or the work that you do. And so they're really improving on it, just aside from the cost issues and just the cost issues side of it. They're really giving their all when it comes to that. Yes.
So earlier you talked about digital and how the digital era is changing things. In what specific ways would you say the digital age has changed the relationship between institutions and public trust, especially given the viral nature of the digital world and how customers can give feedback to a global scale at the click of a button?
Well, the digital age has collapsed the distance between institutions and publics, because before it was timing with the media, so the organization would go to the media, but right now the public actually controls the momentum. You can start something and the public actually picks that and goes away with it. We've seen that in, sometimes a tweet can shape national conversations. A video that surfaces can change perspectives, and also silence is communication on its own. Yeah, because sometimes you can see when just one customer complains and they put that on social media. People, especially on X, will tag that, and they will also give the experiences, and so it becomes a national issue, a national conversation. So that's the power of this digital space. It's collapsed that distance.
Do you find that institutions get the speed of this interaction on digital spaces? Like, for instance, an example is maybe a customer has a very bad experience with an institution and they decide to just go out there and use X or TikTok or Instagram to vent their frustration. Do you think institutions have caught up with the speed of that? That's one. And then two, do you find sometimes the response is appropriate? Because I know institutions that will just decide, this is just a storm, it'll blow over.
Oh, well, many institutions understand digital platform, but we are yet to catch up with the digital psychology. Because with the digital...
Wait, say that again. Many institutions understand
digital platforms,
but we're yet to catch up with the digital psychology.
Yes.
Do tell more.
Well, I think the digital communication is about it's about posting content, and most organizations right now are actually doing that. But for digital communication, it's actually about responsiveness. It's about transparency. It's about emotions, and it's also about credibility. When someone comes and gives a complaint, it will be very prudent for an organization to be able to handle it. But if you remain silent, it means you're understanding the platform, but you're not understanding the psychology of the platform.
Wow.
Yes.
Are there instances as a communication strategist, you would actually advise an organization or an institution to not respond?
Sometimes it depends with the institution and also the gravity, the matter at hand. Because sometimes you will need people in law to give you guidance on that. You'll also need the management so that you're also able to shape that particular information that needs to go out. So sometimes silence can be used, but you should understand the gravity of it. But let it not stay after 24 hours. In between 24 hours, people are able to handle it. But after that, now it will look like the organization decided to just be silent on it. Yes.
There's also this perception, actually narrative, about how we as Kenyans have the memory of a goldfish. That something will be viral for 3 seconds, and after that, we have forgotten. So why wouldn't I, as a comms person for an organization, plug into that? Like, give them time. This hashtag will die down, and then we're back in business.
Well, the digital space sometimes does not give us that grace because people are able to retrieve that.
Yes.
Yes, and then now it comes back to life as a fresh thing, as a new thing. So that's why it is very important that you address the issue, and you also, if it's for a long time, you also keep the doors open in case of more communication or more clarification on that particular issue.
Right.
Yeah.
And I know that for most institutions, it's very important to have your foot on the pedal of controlling the narrative. But in this digital era, can institutions still do that? Can they still control the narrative about the institution again in an age where virality, clicks, like the story precedes you before you even show up?
What I'd say about it is that you do not have control. You cannot have full control of the narrative. But what institutions can control is credibility. They can control consistency, transparency, and responsiveness. These are some of the things that institutions are in a position to actually do, because now narrative is a participation between the public
Yeah.
and the institution. Yeah. Because you see, when something happens, sometimes people don't actually wait for the official statement.
Exactly.
The
Yes.
story just comes and keeps going. So you have to catch up with the people and move ahead of them, because people interpret the events in real time. Yeah.
Do you think institutions do a lot of that, catching up?
Some try. Some try. Yes. Yes.
Right. This is Narratives and Power, where we explore how narratives shape identity, power, and perception in a digital world, and how the stories we believe influence how we show up in life. My guest today is Anne Lichuma, communication strategist, author of The Governance Narrative, host and moderator communication conversations, and curator of Comms in Action. But then before we go on, Anne, where can people find your thoughts about governance narrative?
All the channels, my name is the same, Anne Lichuma. So you'll be able to find, yes, the work that I do on a day-to-day basis.
Okay. So from your experience and working with different and observing different institutions and how they handle communications, what specific narratives do you think limit institutions and why?
I can't. You remember when we started and we said how comes people are usually treated
Yes.
in an organization. So communication. Some will say communication is strategic. PR is only needed during crisis. Silence, because people will say let's just be silent about it to protect the reputation, or to just let the situation die a natural death.
Yeah.
A citizen won't understand transparency. So these are some of the limiting beliefs, on the narratives about in institutions today. These are the ones that are very, very rampant. Yeah. Or when you sometimes also treat communication as a function, you know yeah, when you when you treat it as an announcement function,
Yeah.
more than a strategic leadership function, that is when we have this kind of limiting beliefs.
Let's toil there a little longer. Let's
Okay.
linger. When you treat communication as a function instead of leadership,
Yes.
so that your work is only to talk when something happens. Like you said, PR during a crisis.
Yes.
And that's a conversation I've had with people severally about when do you have public relations? Do you have public relations throughout, or do you have your PR team just lounging around until something happens and then they spring into action?
Well, most of the time, what I'd say about that is what organizations do, they do more PR activities than governance communication.
Yeah.
So PR activities, it's the messaging, it's the campaigns, it's the media relations. Yeah. Governance communication, on the other hand, it's the strategic thinking. What can come out when we do this as an organization. And that is what a lot of comms people are struggling, or we are we are working towards getting to that level. Yeah.
So we're still, even we as
Yes.
comms people, are still treating communication as a function, as media relations, as preparing the press releases. But when it comes to strategic thinking and planning, that's where you're finding a gap.
Yes, that is where we are finding a gap, and that's sometimes the reason why you find comms is more of a secondary part in an organization more than the core among the core functions of the business.
Yeah.
Yes, that is where we're really trying to have this conversation around so that people can understand, people can know what exactly comms can do. Because when you also limit comms, there's nothing much that comms can do.
Yeah.
Because when you have made a decision from the leadership desk, and you're telling them, so it will be more reactive than more proactive. But when you have comms people in the leadership table, it's more proactive, and that's when it's also you're able to, it's giving its full function. Yes.
So we've talked about institutions and whether they care
Yes.
about the perception the public has of them out there.
Yes.
What about the public? Do we care? Or have we normalized being left in the dark, not knowing what's happening, waiting until there's an AGM and they're talking about the balance sheet and all that to know how much am I getting from my shares? Do we now the citizens, the public, do we care?
Yes, the public cares, and that's why you see there are organizations are trending or people are trending. It's because the public is concerned about it, and maybe they're just having a challenge in getting who to address. And so the most, what I'd say, easiest or the most accessible way to get it is to talk about it online. So that gets the attention of whoever needs to address that particular issue. Yes, the public is doing its work.
Right.
Yeah.
Is it possible for an institution to rewrite their story? Like after something has happened and the public perception of that institution has changed, the narrative is that these people are lazy, they don't care, they don't, if you just go there because you have to. And like you talked about monopolies earlier, because you have got nowhere else to go.
Yeah.
So when an institution now looks at itself introspectively and decides, you know what, there's a different way of doing things. Is it possible for that institution to rewrite its story? And what will it take to now allow the public to start interacting with the new perception of that institution?
Yes, it is possible for organizations to rewrite their story. But this is not done through rebranding alone, the logos, the colors, and all that. That is important, but that's not the main thing. Institutions can rewrite their narratives through behavior consistency. If maybe it was more of a complaint, now they're able to have a desk that is handling that. When it's service delivery, they're able to have people who are handling service delivery. They're also accountable to what is happening, to what they're doing. And transparency is actually very core, so that when things happen, people don't just jump into it, because they understand that this organization has been telling us a story. Let's just give them some time. Because sometimes even when you put yourself in that particular situation, there are instances you might not respond very quickly. You have to analyze it, and then now you give your response.
Yeah.
So sometimes the public does give people that grace. Yeah. And also the visible reforms now, the logos, the colors, and things like that.
Right.
Yeah.
So you just pricked my mind about how long it takes to respond, and I'll come to that, but I don't want to lose this trail of thought about. You talked about revamping and rebranding, and it's fascinating how many times institutions think that, to just get a new perception, all you need to do is revamp and rebrand. But the behavioral culture remains the same, so that whether we call you ABC or XYZ is still the same. And the public is not interacting with the name, they're interacting with the behavior. Do you feel that institutions get that? That sometimes it's not just a change of name, it's a change of behavior.
Well, that cuts deep, and that also it will be more on internal issues, because if it's addressed from an internal point, it is easy for that behavior to also be seen externally. But if it's not addressed internally, then it will just be the same output that have been like that, that has been like that. So that is more of internal communication inside the organization, because behavior is very internal. Yeah,
Right.
because it's something that is rooted within people who work within that organization.
And that's where you get that thing. This is how we do things here.
Yes.
This is how we've always done things here. So earlier you talked about the speed sometimes of response, and it just brought to my mind about bureaucracies, because some institutions really are bureaucracies, and these are mostly government institutions where something has happened, and as a comms person, you know that time is of the essence, but the bureaucracy, the ticks that have to be ticked before, the T's that have to be crossed, the I's that have to be dotted, so that by the time you're responding, it's already water under the bridge or the public has moved on. Is there a balance that communication persons in bureaucracies, like government agencies, can strike so that you adhere to the bureaucracy, but you also know that as a communications person, you have timelines?
I will just give my opinion on
Yes,
that,
yes.
because sometimes governments and institutions that are highly bureaucratical in nature, it just depends with who is at the helm of it. Yeah. So I mean, I think those are some of the challenges that we as comms people face, because you understand the truth, you know what needs to be done, but then again, there's a blockage, and sometimes you find that it's also beyond you. It's also beyond you as a person. Yeah, yeah. It's I think I'll just say it's a work challenge. Yeah. It's just the environment that people are in
Yeah.
at that particular moment.
And this can happen in other institutions also that are not bureaucracies, right?
Yes, yes, it can happen. But you see, in institutions like those ones, the stakes are high, because people will have an other option.
Yes.
Yeah, so they might be able to easily go to that. And so that's why most institutions at this point usually responds very fast. But but monopoly, they're still trying to catch up.
Right.
They're still trying to catch up with that. Yeah.
And you know you're a monopoly until you're not. That's the thing that we need to remember. You're only a monopoly until you're not.
Yes, that's true.
So you talked about institutions being able to rewrite their stories. What can they do, for instance, to re-earn that trust with the public?
You know, trust is built. It's not said. It's in the everyday operations of the organization. It's in what the organization believes in and stands for, and their output, or what they would like to achieve at the end of the day. Yes, so you have to be very consistent with that in the activities that you're doing, in the conversations that you're doing with your different audiences and stakeholders. Yeah, so if it's something very consistent, people will also adjust to that new reality. Yeah.
I like that you say consistency. People underestimate the power of consistency. What do you think is the role of storytellers and people in the comms department to ensure that this message is consistently put out there until perhaps it becomes the narrative about this institution? See what I did there? Messaging and narratives.
Yeah, well, for communications professions, we're just not creating content. What you're actually doing, we are the human translators of institutions and the society at large. And so our job is to humanize stories. Our job is to simplify complexities. We are here to protect credibility and also anticipate perceptions. Yeah, because all these factors, they build and sustain trust. Yes. And so good communications teams sometimes they don't manipulate. They stabilize relationships. Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
What do you think intentional communication looks like?
Intentional communication is when you're able to understand your audience, know who are we talking to, what are we saying, how will they benefit from that. Yeah, we start from that. What are their perceptions as far as right now is concerned? How do we want them to receive this? Yes.
And as we bring this to an end, I've had people who say that institutions should actually do more and talk less. That we want to see the work being done and less talk. And here we are as communication people saying we shouldn't just wait until there's a crisis. That's when we run to talk.
Yeah.
So where is the balance? Because there's one side that's saying, no, actually, we don't mind when you're quiet as long as the job is being done. And then we have another school of thought that's saying, no, you can't afford to be too quiet in this digital age. So where do you draw the balance and between knowing when to talk and when not to?
Well, when institutions over communicate, the public is aware. They can be able to know that these people are over communicating because what they're saying and what they're doing does not match.
Yeah. So
And
it's all
so-
talk.
Yes. So now whatever you're saying has to match with what you're doing. And that's how we become very intentional with the communication that goes out. Because it's not about how many posts we have in a day. It's we can even have one in a week, but it matches what we are really doing and what if it's aligning with the mission of the organization and what the public is expecting of us. Yeah.
It just occurred to me, isn't that what governments do? Talk and talk and talk. We'll do, we'll say, we'll do all this, And meanwhile, the public is like, we'd actually just appreciate if you did the work and did not talk as much. So what you're saying, Anne, is that it's important to strike that balance and the public will know that you're over talking.
Yes, because they can tell. They can tell. They can look at in terms of development. You can also look at people's reactions when you introduce either a new law or a new regulation. You can see how the public just responds to that. Yeah, because now that tells you what the public really thinks about you as an organization in general.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it also feeds into the perception of the public. And it can be negative, can it not?
Yes.
When you overtalk, especially when what you're saying does not match what you're doing.
Yes. Yes, it can.
It can be detrimental.
Yes, because you see now in the age where there's trolling, there's all this access to information and freedom with people. They can get away with saying anything, because you can't control that. Yeah.
And is there one narrative about governance or institutions you wish people would question?
I think people should question if communication is separate from governance. Because communication is part of governance function. That is what I really believe in. Because policies, they only become very meaningful when you're able to understand, to trust, and you're able to engage with the public. Yes. So as an institution, the greatest asset today is not visibility. It is credibility.
What?
Our greatest asset is not visibility. It is credibility. Yeah.
That is going to flip someone's whole communication strategic plan because it appears that the strategy has been visibility. Are you on this platform? Are you doing this? Are you doing that? Are you reposting? Are you retweeting? But you're saying it's about credibility.
Yes. Because that
Can
is
we have both?
Yes, visibility and credibility, they are all very important because for you to be credible, also people have to know what it is that you're doing. So, and that is where the part of visibility comes into play. But credibility is you being able to really deliver on that which you're mandated to do. Yeah, and now people are able to buy in to that.
Right. So finally, as we bring this to a close, for someone who's watching and listening to us, and they're wondering, okay, I've had so much from Anne about visibility, credibility, perception, narratives. How do I start now at an individual level? Especially if you're in an organization where, like you said, power and decision-making belongs to someone else. And sometimes I think that is the frustration that leads people to just say, this is above my pay grade. So if they want to communicate, let them communicate. In other words, would you advise someone when there's an issue to use their personal spaces to communicate if this communication is taking long?
That has different angles to it because some organizations, because when you work for certain organizations, they believe that you represent them.
Yes.
And so that's why sometimes when you also check people when they write the opinions here are my own.
Yes.
If they are attached to an organization.
Yeah.
Yes. So I think there's also the policies of organizations on how to sometimes use your social media, your spaces, and what to engage in. So it's important that you also align with that, with what your organization is saying. Because you at that point you represent that organization. So whatever you say will be used as part of information or whatever the public is looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've seen cases where someone got a little excited, like there was unfair flack that the institution they represent was going through, and it was taking too long for the institution to communicate. And I remember this person actually went to their X handle and they issued what they believed was clarification, and this individual lost their job.
Yes, so those are some of the consequences that come with decisions like that, and also the magnitude of the position that someone holds actually in an organization.
Right.
Yeah.
So finally, someone told me that good speakers say finally like 3 times. So this is my third and final finally. Like I said, Anne, you wear so many hats. You're a communication strategist, you're an author, you're a moderator, you're a curator. So now as Anne, as an individual, what narrative did you have to overcome or challenge for you to be able to do what you're doing today?
You do, number one, self-audit, where you really are, and also you look at where you'd like to go. And then from there, you will find your way, because now you know where you've been and where you're able to go. Yeah.
All right. So I want to thank you so much for your time on Narratives and Power today, for being we should do coffee because you were our first guest. Yeah. It'll be months later. We will look back at this episode and say, this is where
we started.
Yeah.
So, we should.
Yeah, we should.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Anne, for finding the time to come on Narratives and Power.
It was great being here.
Well, this has been Narratives and Power, and today we're talking about how narratives shape institutions. Remember, this is a space where we explore how narratives shape identity, power, and perception in a digital world, and how the stories we believe influence how we show up in life. My guest today was Anne Lichuma, communication strategist, author, The Governance Narrative, host and moderator of Communication Conversations, and curator of Comms in Action. My name is Julie, and I will see you on the next episode of Narratives and Power. Remember to like and to subscribe and to hit that notification button so that when we have new content, you're the first to know. Bye.